What's up, guys? So I recorded this gameplay about a couple weeks ago. This is, I believe, the patch is 0.85, if I'm not mistaken. This is my first time playing Exanima since that patch, and what's on display here is just the changes to the animations. I believe they tweaked weapon mass, muscle tension. There will be some noticeable differences in combat. It took me a while to really get used to it. The first thing that I noticed right off the bat was that my character was really following through with his swings a lot quicker, and at first it felt very unnatural. It was, in my opinion, a bit too weighty and slow last patch. So I do agree that it needed to be tweaked and attuned a little bit better than what it was. But at first I was like, I think they may have gone overboard. But when I went back and I watched some of the fights, and compared it to that of the last video I did for Exanima, I was like, okay, these fights actually look a lot better. Now, granted, this isn't, the best gameplay or anything, because I'm not very good at the game. I haven't really played it that much, but nevertheless, it's just, I'm definitely not a good example of someone who has mastered control over their character. But I do have my moments, and I had a few moments in this session here. I did have some struggles as well, but let me talk a little bit about, I guess, my initial impressions. As I mentioned, kind of following through with weapons was the first thing that I picked up on, and as a result, I was having problems controlling my own swings, and at the same time, I'm having problems reading my opponents. Like, holy shit, that guy just put me down like it was nothing. He was really flinging out those one-handed mace attacks quickly, and I was having, a lot more difficulty reading my opponents because, the wind-up for those attacks was significantly reduced. So it gave me a lot of ideas as far as controlling my own attacks is concerned, and throwing out combinations. Whereas before, especially when I'm using a two-handed weapon, like a two-handed axe or a two-handed mace, something that has a lot of weight to it, I find it difficult putting together combinations. But now, after this last patch, you can actually put together some combos fairly nicely. On top of that, with two-handed weapons, but it does take me a while to get going here. I do go through a couple swaps in weapons, if I'm not mistaken. I think for the first maybe third of the video, I'm going with the two-handed axe. I end up switching things off to a two-handed mace somewhere along the way. Oh shit! My AI was honorable and let me get back up after that, but yeah. There's another thing, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, is the changes to weapon mass. I've noticed that two-handed weapons, and just even one-handed weapons for that matter, you saw how that one-handed mace just kind of flung me on my ass there, but I've noticed that when you get hit directly from an attack, it really devastates your character. It makes you off balance. The blunt force impact is a lot more extreme now, it appears. But simultaneously, blocking attacks with a one-handed shield or, you know, like a small shield like my opponent is using right now, rather, you know, like a buckler or something like that, it doesn't really seem like there's, you know, much weight behind my attacks. It seems just like it was before. Blocking almost feels like it's a little too unrealistic that, you know, someone can just block a two-handed axe with a buckler with ease like that. I think it'd be a little bit more difficult, and I think there should be perhaps a little bit more impact behind, you know, directly connecting with a shield, especially a small shield like this. Now, if they ever put in great shields or something like that, yeah, I could understand, you know, not being shaken from a two-handed weapon as badly, at least. But yeah, I mean, being able to block with these small shields and counter with ease is just a little too much for me. That was a nice. I was just making sure he was dead there. That was just a moment that felt pretty good. A couple feints left and right, and then, you know, my opponent is just completely dropping his guard, looking for that side block, and, you know, meanwhile I'm just readying an overhead attack. It just lands flush. Really good feeling. Now, one of the coolest parts about this game to me was, you know, my first couple times playing it was the satisfaction you get when you land a flush hit. And after this patch, I don't think anything's really changed there. I do feel like some of the animations are perhaps, they just feel a little awkward. I didn't like the way it felt with this two-handed axe here. I need to try things out with the battle axe, I think that's what it's called, the one that you can pick up in the expert arena. I'd like to see how that feels. But this really didn't feel that good to me. I switched off really as soon as I got the chance to try out a weapon that I was interested in. And that's actually that two-handed mace that my opponent is fighting against me with right now. And that was a pretty ugly fight, but luckily I was able to drop him, upgrade the fashion a little bit, and swap off to a new weapon. I think I talked about this a little bit, actually, in the first video I did for this game. But the fashion in the Novice arena is very lackluster compared to the expert. You know, I guess as a result, to me, it's a little bit more underwhelming. It doesn't really showcase the potential of the game the same way. But I guess there are a few interesting opponents in Novice Arena, you know, especially towards the end. Now this opponent right here is actually quite difficult, for me at least. I have problems with the, you know, sword and board type opponents. Blocking is something that I have difficulty getting through. You know, sometimes I'll just be able to sneak attacks through one way or another. Aiming low is usually to my benefit, but a lot of times the opponent just kind of hones in on my attacks and just seems to block everything I throw, despite my best efforts in trying to mix things up, you know, feinting left and right, and you know, stuff like that. Sometimes it just doesn't work. But I did want to kind of speed things up a little bit. I didn't want to show every fight, you know, during the ascent, but I wanted to show at least some of the highlights and good combinations that I had. Some of the more satisfying moments, at least. And I also took quite a few just brutal hits. Like, taking a hit from the two-handed mace is just absolutely punishing. I took a lot of permanent damage after that fight right there. And as you can see, you know, going in to my rematch with this chick here, I'm already just pretty much dead, especially after that huge hit she just landed on me. Man, it's just disgusting. And there's an example of just throwing your opponent on their ass when you connect with an attack. That wasn't a direct connect. I don't think, at least. I think it kind of I hit her with the haft of the axe, and it didn't hit the shield. I think it kind of hit her shoulder, but it was enough. The force behind it just sent her flying. However, if she was to block that attack, I don't think it would have had any impact on her at all. I would really like to see. I'd really like to see, more force behind hitting a shield. I think that'd be an awesome addition to the game. Just kind of up the realism a little bit and make the combat feel a little bit better too. Just fighting. Now, I don't think the shield is necessarily overpowered. I just think it kind of takes away from the combat a little bit, the constant blocking without any repercussion, basically. I think that aspect of the game could be tuned up just a little bit. I don't think there needs to be huge changes, just slight changes here and there to make things a little bit more interesting there. But like I said, earlier, sometimes you can sneak attacks through, aiming low, hitting your opponent around the ankles and whatnot. Overhead attacks as well. I have quite a bit of success using the overhead attacks against shield users. It just, I just feel like the chances of landing a flush hit are a lot more successful when using an overhead attack. Feint left, feint right, go for the overhead, something like that. This game, there are no brightness settings for the game. It's kind of weird. That's something that I would like to see in the future, at least to some degree, because it is. Now, I think it looks fine. I don't have any complaints with the way the game looks. I think it does look pretty darn good, as far as I'm concerned. But it could use some customization options in that department. These recordings definitely turn out a lot darker than the actual gameplay that I'm seeing on my end during the recording. My capture card seems to do that quite a bit, despite having the brightness levels up and all that. Just one of those things. But yeah, this is kind of I get in these I go through these moments where I was able to finish her there. That was actually a little unexpected. But that was a bit of a struggle. They kind of lock into my battle rhythm, and they'll just block everything. And I'm just sitting there just like trying to think of some sort of combination that I can throw out to get an attack through. So some of those fights can just kind of drag on, for a lot longer than I would honestly prefer. But fighting against opponents like this, that aren't shielded up, the fights seem to go a lot quicker, either in my favor or not. I just prefer that either way. But this is a pretty awesome weapon here. I was able to just kind of lay this guy out. He didn't really put up much resistance. So once again, fashion upgrade, sweet. And I also snatch up his weapon. I don't think I'd do it right away, actually. But eventually I end up grabbing this guy's weapon. It's just, the two-handed greatsword. I'd imagine if this game did have PvP one of these days, that you would see a lot of two-handed greatswords floating about, because it's just such a solid weapon. You can swing so quickly with it, and the attacks are devastating when they land. And one of the reasons why I end up switching over to it is because I feel like it combats a shield a lot better than a two-handed mace. Honestly, I think a two-handed mace really, and I hate to dwell on this topic, it certainly wasn't what I wanted to talk about primarily for the video, but I think a two-handed mace should have a lot more success fighting a shield. She just sliced me up there, man. That wasn't even close. But I think fighting shielded opponents, that should be, one of the perks to using a two-handed mace, is being able to crush through those defenses. Whereas a two-handed sword, I don't think it should be a bad matchup against a shield, but I think it would make a little bit more sense if the shield would have a little bit more of an advantage in that matchup. It just makes a little bit more sense to me. This is just kind of a highlight session of my ascent, going back up to rematch this chick once again. Like the female opponents, man, God, they're always the toughest roadblocks for me. But here's this weapon, pretty sweet looking, and actually I think this is one of the most epic fights in this session by far. Actually, I switch over to this weapon, which gives me a lot more, I guess, confidence in my offense, because I'm able to just throw out this, wall of blades, basically, with this two-handed sword, constantly throwing out these attacks, this offensive wall that you really just can't get past. Ooh, did that hurt? Sorry about that. But after this hit, she just kind of gets a lot more aggressive. She's a lot more on point with those blocks. I'm trying to stay aggressive here, mind you, but I think this is just one of those situations where, I'm just not throwing out the right combos, perhaps. I know that if I hit her, here's really what I'm thinking, honestly, at this point. Probably, even though I recorded this a couple weeks ago. But this is something that I fall into when I play this game. I'll land a really big hit, and I'm just like, how are you still standing? I'm thinking I just have to breathe on them at this point to finish them. And, there it is, basically. All I really had to do was just hit her one more time with pretty much any attack, and she was going to go down after that huge overhead attack that I landed earlier. But I get into this kind of mentality where I'm just trying to get in one last hit, and I'm perhaps not fighting as smartly as I could be. And I'm getting, maybe a little too excited. But we have one final fashion upgrade on the way out. We get some nice spalders there. I'm just kind of nitpicking through the gear. And this is the final boss. He's a pretty sick weapon. One thing I mentioned in the last video as well is I wish you could pick up the weapons from the last opponent in the arena. But once you finish off the last opponent, the arena just kind of ends, your character freezes, and the only thing you can do is return to the main menu. So that's something that I hope they patch in. Just a very minor fix, but it would be nice to use both this weapon and the weapon from the final arena. Hope you guys enjoyed it.